For you today, talking a bit about the sort of the responsibility and role of sort of play in learning.
And certainly around failure, and that title that we used initially failed, so we have a new title. So notice that. We always like to start with a little warm-up. So you have a sheet of paper, find something to write with, pen, pencil, whatever. Really quickly, find something. If you don't have something, ask someone else for someone. Someone will have multiple pens.
And failing that, use your laptop.
No, don't use your laptop. You can write on your laptop as something. And then, so this is a really quick warm-up, but it requires you to play along. So I'm asking you guys to play along here. So you need to pick a partner. It doesn't have to be your best friend or anyone. Just someone you're sitting next to. Someone, say hi to them. But pick a partner. If you don't have a partner, look behind you. But make sure you're going to play along with this for me. All right, so if you're just settling in, grab a sheet of paper, pen,
within the
pick
confines of shooting.
All right, if you're just settling in, grab, even you folks in the back, way in the back, then you can play along too. All right. Piece of paper and a pen, pick a partner. Now, this is we're only going to give you about 30 seconds for this little exercise. Again, play along. You do a sketch portrait drawing of your partner, and they will do a quick portrait drawing of you. Mark, get set, go. Not giving you much time. You got to play along. I see some folks not playing along. Draw quickly, you only have 15 more seconds. Draw quickly. Nice, nice. Big strokes. Big strokes. 10 seconds. All right. Okay, now I want everyone to share your drawing with your partner. Share your drawing with your partner. One, thank you for playing along. And we'd love to get people to sketch. If you want to be more creative, just do more quick sketches. How many people feel you're a really good drawer? Raise your hand really high. All right. But how many people do at least one quick sketch a day? All right, awesome. We're not trying to get you to be fabulous illustrators, back of the napkin kind of sketches. That's what you want. Think about how many emails you get a day. If it's like Duane or myself, it's probably over 100 or 50 or something. I'm way more excited when someone comes to my office with a quick sketch than, hey, I got another email, right? So it's way better as far as something like that. So do a little bit more of that. There's something, we asked you to draw a portrait, which is a really tough assignment. We wanted you to do that for a reason. You got a couple of people up here talking about innovation and creativity. I suspect some of you, maybe not all, were worried about, hey, I'm worried about my drawing skills, and I'm worried about what that person's going to think about how bad my drawing's looking. So you're judging yourself versus being generative, versus saying, hey, I get to draw. This is fun. This is creative time. If you look at kids doing this, they love it. Hey, drawing time, fantastic. They're not worried about it. They're not worried about judging themselves. They're not worried about the tribe judging them. So get back to that mode a little bit. So during this talk, we're in this little safe environment, so we want to do that. They're not afraid to fail on their drawings. We're afraid. So a little reminder, I suspect we all know this, but this is a nice example to bring that back. All right.
So why didn't we just do that little embarrassing exercise? I heard a lot of apologies along the way. Whenever we do this, there's a lot of, I'm really sorry. I don't really think you look like this. But for us, I think we try to every day take ourselves out of our comfort zone. And the reason for that is that's how we generate and come up with new ideas. And what we want to share today are kind of 3 things that we do kind of on a daily basis, our principles of how we practice, and sort of lift it up a little bit. So the 3 things are role play, encourage ridiculous, and think with your hands. So we'll talk a little bit about what each of those mean, and we'll share some stories. And again, part of this is based on even understanding kids and play and how they work and what are principles from that. And knowing that as we get older, the tools, the materials, the spaces start to disappear and we lose some of that kind of naivete and sort of willingness to engage. So if I take something like role playing, one of the things that's really interesting when you look at kids is it is play that's based upon a set of rules and agreements. So there's an agreement here which is we're playing shopping and we're not playing cops and robbers. So what does that mean? We're trying things on for size, we're experimenting, we're trying out scripts that we would have heard or seen, we're imagining scenarios and learning through the process of doing that. And so we look at ways that we can try to do that ourselves, because often we're put in the task of designing things that we're not the end users of, we've not experienced before. They may be things that are new to the world. How do we get into this place of understanding and being generative? One of the examples for us, I think one of the things IDEO is probably best known for, despite the fact it's so old, is this, how many people have seen the shopping cart video, which was for Nightline for like more than a decade ago? Yeah. So this was when we were going to put on the spot. So I don't know if people know the context of this, but they filmed us for 5 days, applying the principles of how we do it, what we do, sort of the design thinking, designer's toolkit of empathy, prototyping, things like that, to a problem we didn't know what it was going to be. So it turned out it was a shopping cart. We tried to kind of like get our sort of intelligence ahead of time to see if we could get prepared. So we had heard and surmised that it was going to be redesigning the phone booth. So here we did all this work researching, yeah, again, this is like 97, 98, so phone booths were still around. Turns out we got that totally wrong. It came in and it was the shopping cart. So okay, starting from scratch, quickly, let's get into the context. So this notion of role-playing within the grocery environment was one of the things to just start to get ourselves immersed in.
I'm pretty sure we asked him again, shopping cart, really?
Yeah, really? You got that wrong. You got the wrong index. We do this a lot in our work. One of the areas we do a lot of work is in healthcare and thinking about things like patient experience. This was an example of one of our anthropologists, a guy named Christian, who went through the process of checking himself into the ER and went through all of those procedures and filmed it. So he wore this or had this giant camera for a reason. One is to make sure he didn't get jabbed with a needle accidentally. But the interesting thing here was that no one asked him, right? None of the hospital staff asked him why he was filming this whole process. But so it was about a 3-hour experience for him, and we played the footage back later. And you might suspect it was about 3 hours. We did speed it up of this, which was a drop ceiling, people coming and going, not introducing themselves to him, talking about him in the third person as if he wasn't there, using terminology he didn't understand. And it's one of those things where the hospital staff had never put themselves in the perspective of the people they were trying to serve. Right? They were bodies, they weren't human beings. So when we shared this, they were horrified. They said, we had no idea that this was the experience we were creating for people. And they immediately started thinking about, well, what could we do? We could put mirrors on the gurneys so people could look up and see around them. We could decorate the ceilings. But got them into a generative way of thinking, like what are all the solutions we could create to do this? We tried also to give them their own sort of empathy experience where we had them meet us in the patient waiting room, which they'd never really been in before, and we showed up really late. So trying to give them their own kind of empathy experience for what they were doing. But again, what was interesting is this trigger, role-playing and empathy were triggers for them to actually start learning and generating ideas. So we actually did have them try things out. So the next step was, let's create some scenarios of patient care that we think are particularly important based on the things that we've observed and saw. How might we create some new solutions? So these are doctors and nurses and hospital directors dressed up in kind of ridiculous costumes running around. But the point here is that they were generating new ideas or solutions and trying different service ideas on for size through the process of role-playing. And we're capturing those things and then taking those to the next step. How might we then take this idea that emerged here and prototype that with actual patients and learn from that? So using role-playing as a generative exercise. Another example of this is another one of our anthropologists who was doing a project around people with certain severe medical conditions that needed their dressings changed, and that process was quite painful. He said, I don't really have any understanding of what that might be like. I don't want to make assumptions. So he's like, what can I do to simulate that? So he had his chest waxed. Afterwards, he was like, I don't think that was such a great idea. You see from the expression on his face, he was all happy to have it be documented. He's like, I'm not so sure. Now here we are sharing this photograph in front of a huge audience. It's not the first time it's happened. But this notion of how can I actually put myself in the place of someone else and assume those roles and understand what that means. We'll also do some things around the relationship between role play and kind of the moderation of that. And I'm going to show you a video. It's old technology. It was done on a mobile phone, pre-iPhone. It's kind of old, so it's a little bit grainy. And you also get a sense of IDEO as multiculturalism. There are accents from across the world. So you might need to listen a little bit, but what it's going to illustrate is a group of people playing out a scene around transportation, and then how they kind of pull back and discuss what happened. It's just a couple minutes long.
So I saw in my newspaper this ads like I'm going to Boston for there's a discount for the week, and I would like to go to Boston with my daughter.
Certainly.
And I would like to explain me.
Of course. It's all right, dear. Do you want to play with your crayons? And I was drawing a dog and I had a man.
Okay, let's keep going.
Certainly, yeah. Well, this is a special offer.
Yes.
So for this weekend only.
Yeah.
You'll be able to get a train. You'll be able to get a train from the station. I can give you a map on how to get to the station.
Oh, that would be very nice.
And
it's interesting that you have a map, so you can make some color. Isn't that nice?
Don't be shut up!
Oh, yes.
For the children. Do you know how long you'd like to stay?
I'd like to stay a week.
Well, yes. I'm not sure that this offer would be the best thing for you.
Listen to them. She says there's a problem.
That's fine, then.
Yeah, later, just.
Oh, that's okay.
Agent aside.
I don't want to be dealing with all of this. I prefer to have a way to focus on my interaction. I prefer a way to focus on my interaction with the customer. So it'd be really great if, like IKEA, there's a creche for little Jessie here, or some other way to entertain her. And I would also like to have more giveaways, so that I can explain elements of the offer.
So sometimes just an early idea we're presenting with, let's just play it out and see how that works. What are the cues? What are the things we might need around us? And use it as a way to generate ideas. Pass the torch over to Brendan.
So I want to talk about encouraging ridiculous in the sense of generating ideas. So I think there's this fine line between sort of brilliant and ridiculous. And in fact, so much that I suspect every brilliant idea at one point probably seemed very ridiculous. And some of you probably worked on some things that many folks have probably said ridiculous, or at least to me. I mean, I'm used to hearing that. So. But I can think of almost anything. I like to use sometimes eye care. Like, I suspect the first guy who invented glasses, which was in 1287, felt, try these on. It's like kind of weird. Like, I remember trying glasses on for the first time in the 8th grade. I'm sure I needed them in the 4th grade. That's why I sat in the front of the room. But I didn't want to wear glasses because I thought they looked weird, right? So think about back then trying to get people to try something completely different. So getting comfortable with that ridiculous. Then the first contact lens. Can you imagine a piece of blown glass trying to get that in someone's eye? Like, hey, try this into your eye. Don't worry, just a prototype. Does that ever break? Well, maybe. But so that same thing. And then I remember laser surgery, thinking, boy, laser surgery. They're gonna shoot lasers into someone's eye? That's completely ridiculous. And then being from California, thinking, what if the earthquake hits right as the laser is hitting your eye? So this is an area I'm really passionate about so much. So this is a really interesting chart. It's not ours. It's from a fellow named Deb Patnick who started Jump. So I love this quote. Out of 100 ideas, the first 60 ideas produced 5 that were actually new or different. The next 20 produced nothing but laughter, and ideas 80 to 100 produced another 10 that were amazing. Thankfully, we didn't give up when the well ran dry around idea number 60. So this is a nice quote, when the going gets tough, the tough gets stupid. So again, this is about being in an environment that's safe, a playful environment where it's okay to push yourself to these so-called ridiculous ideas that sometimes can be really close to being something brilliant. So having this environment that's safe is really neat. So I like this, and we'll jump. So much so I'm passionate about this area. I did a project last year with John Cassidy, the founder of Clutch. Cass is a great guy, and we were both really super excited about this. So we created a whole book of, the Clutch book of inventions. It's 162 brilliant / ridiculous ideas. And we had wonderful brainstorms, and we were just, it just proved to us that to have an environment like this, it's great to just continually practice and do more of it. So I'll show you a couple of the ideas that came out of the book, and you can decide if they're brilliant or ridiculous. One, I don't know about you, if I get a parking ticket, I'm pretty bummed out. Like, it can ruin like just 15 minutes if I've been there earlier, right? So, especially in Palo Alto, it's $35 a ticket now. So we came up with the idea about putting the fun back in the citations. So it's stress off. So double my fine, zero fine, we owe you the fine. So,
that's funny.
there may be something there. There's something around compliance with parking tickets most people throw away, right? So if you do the math right, there might be something there. So I'll show another one. How might we make it easier to use an umbrella in a rainy area? So we got the helium umbrella that just floats. That's why you have two. You can do more texting this way. We went around sending packages that were lighter, so you go into the post office and it kind of floats. And then I'll show one more exercise. All right, so I'd love to sort of get people comfortable pushing this ridiculous. And then you can extrapolate how to do this in your own culture. Like, is it a safe enough culture to push your innovation level a little bit further? So I need you to pick a partner again. So buddy up a little bit. This will be
You can do the same one if you were
same one if you want. Buddy up. All right, and then step one is this is a ridiculous technique called the mashup. Now you got to play along. We're all friends here. One person makes a list of 5 to 10 unique things that you find in your junk drawer. Make them really unique. The more unique, the better. And then one person lists 5 to 10 things you find in the typical drugstore. Cool. Your CVS's or something like that. So work separately just for a couple minutes. Create a list. Each person creates a list.
Yeah, well, I ran out of hard drive space, but I'm still videotaping. But now I have a free port where I can stream the video. So the video is coming through now.
Quickly make your list. Who got it? I got really quiet. I feel like I stressed everyone out like I handed out an exam. This is only a list, right?
Well, it's a junk drawer, right? I don't remember what it
Is this room also used for exams?
Yeah, probably. All right, now, you each got your list. Now, the next part, we're going to jump. This is called the mashup. Compare your list. Now, let's see if we'll take a few minutes to brainstorm a new product or something that with a combination. So it's an easy example. You have a welcome mat, you have a whoopee cushion, you've invented the whoopee mat. So look at your two lists. Look at your two lists and see if you can do a mashup. Look at your two lists and see if you can create a mashup. See what comes to the
Great.
All right, just another minute, not much more time. there. You can continue being ridiculous during the break. So just a couple things. So when I walk by a brainstorming room, even on a tough or serious issue, and I hear laughter, I know there's creativity happening. It's just like a little measure. So when I hear this, I hear some laughter. You're loosening up and you're getting to somewhere different creatively, which I love. So we'll hear 3 or 4. If people really would love to share, I'd love to hear a couple. And I have a book for the applause meter on the 3 or 4 that we hear. We'll award a book for one. So be really psyched if you're going to get up. So all right, we'll start with you and speak really loud, and I'll repeat it too.
We have an edible pencil for compulsive pencil chewers.
Edible pencil! Not bad! Was that a straight mashup or did, okay, awesome. All right, let's go way in the back in the orange.
Self-adhesive wrapping paper.
Self-adhesive wrapping paper. That sounds really marketable. You guys better leave it and start getting some funding on that one. All right, we'll go with you guys.
Okay, combination of nail clippers and old socks. Socks that clip your toenails.
Socks that clip your toenails. We have the 100-yard sock in the book where you just roll it, cut it, and then tie it. So I think this is better. This is better. Oh, what do you got?
How about an inflatable balloon that when it gets wet, it turns into shampoo that you can wash your hair with?
Wow. What a mashup. This is good. Okay, we'll get a couple more.
The toothbrush key. Never be away from home without your toothbrush.
Toothbrush and key. All right. Yeah, I don't know how to. Duane's going to decide, so I don't have to decide. Okay. Somebody else. Who's got a mic?
Preparation.
Okay.
Preparation H and stamps.
Preparation H and stamps. All right. One more. We'll do one more.
We have a line of shampoo. For the kids, it's candy shampoo, and for the adults, it's aspirin shampoo.
Candy and aspirin shampoo. The guy in the that guy right here.
Pushpin aspirin.
Pushpin aspirin. So you create the pain and then you use it. All right, it's the whole cycle. All right. One, you guys, awesome around that. The boy, I don't know how to decide.
Well, I think the strongest outburst we heard was the preparation.
Oh yeah. So preparation H, people.
That was a marketing campaign.
So I've done this several times with college students, and I've yet not to hear at least one condom combination. So I applaud you guys for not going there. Oh, you had it in the back. Your word that was too ridiculous for this audience, right? Okay, so I appreciate that.
All right, so bring it home with the third word. Just think with your hands. So another way to talk about is think to build. So this idea of build to think, which is this idea that as we're constructing, we're learning along the way. And again, we're taking our cue from kids. So at least in the West, sort of average first graders can spend up to half of their time engaged in construction plays. So this idea, as I'm playing with these blocks, I'm learning about towers, I'm learning about gravity, I'm learning how these things come together, I'm trying things on for size by building. And we do a lot of that, of just having materials on hand, or anyone that goes by our offices, we just have like stuff in baskets in all the meeting rooms, so you can just sort of have stuff at hand to kind of make and put things together. And we'll do things really quickly. This was I would say this is a classic failure project, which was an airline was pursuing a way to get flat beds in place, and they said, we think that we want to introduce some sort of bunk bed system. And how do you think people would feel about sleeping on top of and next to each other? She's like, well, let's just try it. So we just took a space, grabbed some chairs, and then looked at how that would reconvert and had people just lay down. And it was like, you can see their laugh, like, I would never ever do this. You'd have to pay me $10,000 business class to do this. So this was a great, it took no effort to just build this idea, try it out and say, this is absurd, it's not going to work. What's the next thing we can try? We had another project, and this is quite a bit older. Wait, did I hear a comment from the back? No, okay. We had a project where the team got stuck and they couldn't figure out the solution for something. This is sort of early in the days of IDEO. And just grabbed a bunch of materials that were at hand, and for some reason roll-on deodorant happened to be one of those things that was at hand, and it inspired a solution to a particular problem. Anyone want to hazard a guess as to what that might be?
Glue?
Oh, I heard somebody said, yeah, it was exactly it. That ended up being the mechanism for the first commercial mouse. So, good guess. So this idea of sometimes just being able to start building and constructing is a way sometimes to get unstuck. And that's a technique we use a lot. It's also sometimes a vehicle to help people communicate. So back to healthcare and patient care, we did an exercise with nurses around thinking about ways that they could have better handoff of information between shifts. How do we know that when one nurse picks up from another that the patient information is there, that the patient is known and addressed? And this nurse built a quick prototype of a fictitious electronic device that would assist her in that. And she wasn't necessarily requesting that someone go out and manufacture this device, but it was the cue for her that gave her the ability to put in words the things that she felt she needed. So this was by building this, she created a representation of her needs and was able to discuss those and get those out so we could talk about what are ways that we might actually take the thinking in that and prototype solutions that we can try pretty quickly.
Cue music. So this is
another example of prototyping.
And I'm the player, so I come in and I touch the monster. I do these special things with it. I know it again. And he does a different one. And it can go as long as I want if he has a few signature moves. And when I've had enough and I'm done dancing, I push the back button and pauses and music stops. Answer me.
Cool.
So you might want to.
Yeah, so this is for Elmo's Monster Maker, and I see Miles Liquid out there. We got to collaborate with his team, which was fantastic, and talk about teams that played well together, and so it was so much fun. But we were trying to share back and forth because we were in Palo Alto and New York, quick ways Elmo's going to dance. So Adam got there, and that's just a big sheet of foam cord, the team's behind it. But unless you didn't pick up on the scale, you probably thought that we'd mock this up and put it on a video. But we shot a bunch of different dance moves in literally, a half hour, and then you could shift those back and forth. And Adam, again, like Alte with the, he's been all over now on this video. Yeah. So it's these dance moves failed completely. But we learned, and every time I see Elmo Dance on the app, I think back to all the quick experiments we did on that, which was fun.
Despite people in the audience had the same reaction I did. The first time I saw this, I didn't realize that he was live behind that. When he reached through, it was like, whoa, what's going on there? This is just another example of a process of just a team collaborating together and working on some different ideas. But one of the things that was amusing once we took the picture was we hadn't noticed that the little duck down there in the lower left appeared to be looking on as the foreman for the project. Just showing a little bit of ridiculous. All right, so some parting thoughts, building on some things we just talked about.
So one is, I think you picked up from the ridiculous and the think with your hands, lots of quick failures to hopefully get to something that's successful. But then also thinking about your play space, and is that a safe environment to innovate in? And it's everywhere. So this is a van that's been, the fellow who led this group went on vacation. His team found one in a junkyard, gutted it, used welding torches to cut down the gates and the doors, put his desk, his laptop, his computer, his phone in there, and then he came back and they went ta-da, right? So it also has a nice culture of a sort of a playful, good-spirited humor. And again, cultivated, careful, ask for forgiveness instead of permission. So if they burned the building down, they would have been asking for forgiveness. But he sat there for about 6 months, and then we made it into a little conference room. But thinking about this year's space, does it feel like it's a safe environment to push yourself a little bit more?
Yeah. It actually got so popular that the roof deck had to be added
to
the meetings. And you can actually book it on our intranet system if you need a meeting room. So But I think a big part of it was that we try to use space. I alluded to things like having just kits of things available in rooms for people to just grab and try things out, but it's giving people permission to be creative. So often what happens, particularly for our bigger projects, we actually have project rooms. So where the teams actually get together, they spend most of their time working together in that environment. And one of the rituals often is decorating that project space to create an inspirational environment. So this was a project that was around air travel. And one of the things, this is a team member, this is actually in our Cambridge office, of hanging up all these planes from the ceiling just as a way to start to get the team to kind of think about or be inspired by the subject matter of the project. So project space will go through these kind of amazing decoration processes over the course of their life cycle. Also, there are sometimes some things that teams will do just as kind of cues to kind of spur each other on in their thinking. So there was a little bet between team members around reasonable or unreasonable comments around the progress of their prototype. So they made this kind of let's be reasonable here kind of matrix and evaluate each of the team members about how reasonable they were or were not being. So you can see there's quite a spectrum between Robert and Colin. But giving teams the ability to say, create those tools which in a way inspire new forms of interactions and making those permissible.
So we want to just try to tie this together lightly. I'm incredibly passionate about play, and I think where adults go sort of off is they start to think the opposite of play is work, versus really excited about the opposite of play is either boredom or in the worst cases depression in some instances. So thinking about that, and then also thinking about play and innovation, I think a lot of companies start to think play is recess, like, oh, that's the kind of goofy stuff we'll do, then we'll get back to the real work. And really starting to understand it's part of the process, it's not recess, it's part of the process, and it helps all these quick failures to better learning. So if I look at role-playing, it kind of translates the inspirational play, which is inspiration, then encourage ridiculousness, exploratory or creative play, ideation, and then think with your hands, or constructive play, or implementation, which then sort of leads into our overall core principles for design thinking in this continued loop of learning and then repeating and iterating as fast as you can.
Yeah. So I think that for us, I mean, thinking about sort of what's our daily practice look like and how do we kind of build these things in either internally or working with our clients. So that's kind of what we wanted to share.
So we want to say thank you. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Any questions? Oh, come on, we've been through stamps and preparation H together.
Really? Also, grab us.
Oh, there, here we go, Scott.
Up.
It's an impressive camera setup you got there too. I was like, wow, that's amazing from his seat that's all there.
Thanks. I just had a question. I mean, I thought your presentation was great, but can you talk about your non-crawling text at the bottom of the screen?
Oh, that was a little, almost a little pop-up video idea, which was just, I don't know, sometimes in presentations you're like, okay, I'm kind of listening, but I'm done, I'm moving on to the next thing. So I was like, let's just throw something in. And again, this was an experiment. First time we've done that. Just like a little bit of extra information, which we may or may not talk about for people to read. So that was the intent behind doing that. So pop-up video was the inspiration for that. And you'll let us know if that was a successful experiment or a failure. So, so question back there.
I love how you embrace the idea that you allow yourselves to fail, try and see what happens. What is the what's the percentage of the products that go to implementation? Just maybe a sense of like how often, I think it's great, fail, but when does one go through? How often does that happen?
It's a real scary statistic, actually. And most companies don't talk about it because, hey, I don't talk about failure. We want to just talk about our successes. So Bob Sutton, who's a professor in industrial management over at Stanford, written a couple wonderful books. He interviewed me a long time ago, just around toy invention, around a little group that we have called the Toy Lab. And we went through how many brainstorm ideas, how many prototype ideas, how many fully mocked up, and how many we pitched and sold. So I think it went from like 4,000 brainstorm ideas down to 400 sketches, down to 40 prototypes, down to 4 sold, down to 1 that probably was making a lot of money or something. So it depends on different industries. I think a better metric is around how many experiments. how many things are you trying? So if I measured the more brainstorms we did or the more prototypes we did, I'll feel more confident we'll get to success. So I think people don't measure that. So, you know, they're measuring the wrong thing, and then people sort of hide that stuff, like, oh, we had that flash of genius versus lots.
I think the other point is that on that earlier slide where there was sort of a circle diagram on ideation is that you want many failures early to learn from those things. So, for example, rather than like putting all your bets on one thing, becoming emotionally attached to that, and then shipping it and finding out it kind of missed the boat. So I did the airline example of, did people want to sleep with bunk beds? We can make a very early prototype, rule that out almost immediately, but then see what we learn from the fact that that doesn't work. So what do we need to preserve people's personal space, for example? So let's build that into the next round of ideation, see what comes out of that, and that kind of moves us forward because each of those incremental things that don't work teach us something to build towards final solutions.
Just as a follow-up question to that, I was curious, how do you monetize experimentation and failure?
Interesting.
You don't.
How do you monetize the process or the result, or?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we hope our clients we're getting to success. So I mean, we built a business around innovation. And then in certain areas, we're creating things on our own, like a lot of the work in the toy lab or some other startups. But
I'd also say, just in terms of this process I was just talking about, that's actually a way we discuss how we work with our clients. So for a lot of our clients, when they come to us, it's this, let's take an idea, let's build a really expensive prototype and test it, and then we'll incrementally adjust it because we're not willing to make big changes because we spent a lot of money on it. So it's this sort of process of, let's start this early, let's lead with human insights, are there really needs here, let's use that to translate that into an understanding of what some early things are that we try. So we go for kind of even live prototyping or piloting ideas early on as a way to learn that. So it's part of just, it's kind of part of how we structure our engagements with our clients. It's not like there's a separate activity of investing upfront in trying 100 ideas before we talk to a client. So it's baked into how we work. I don't know if that answers your question, but we can talk more afterwards because I want to make sure I actually understood.
I was wondering how you would maybe document or keep all of the information that you learned from the failures for each project, because maybe personal space in the bunk bed project would help you down the line with something else.
Yeah. We have a couple of vehicles. There are kind of early insights that we try to collect and look at kind of trends or patterns and coalesce those. There's actually a site we put up, which is patterns.ideo.com, which is where a lot of those things reside. Sometimes also early on in a project, we will have a lot of those ideas that we'll document, and it may or may not be things that we take forward, but sometimes our clients might say, well, we could pursue this at another point in a different direction. So packaging and cataloging those so that they're not lost, that they live somewhere. The other thing that we'll try to do actively is cross-pollination in projects. So essentially move someone from one type of project or industry to another to bring some of the early thinking or ideas or failures into that. So there might be things that you would learn in experiments in retail and hospitality that you might apply to delivery of healthcare, for example. So making those transitions are people.
All right, one more. Sure.
So I was wondering if you'd say a few words about what, you're obviously both partners at IDEO, so you've had a chance to be there for a while. When you first came on, what did you have to unlearn in order to get into this headspace to learn this way of design?
You can share each of our experiences.
Yeah, what I had to unlearn was jump into a solution too quick. I'm an engineer by training, so when we added the human factors sort of whole area, you know, people going out, looking at stuff, the modern day anthropologists, and it's like, seemed like a cool job, but, you know, get to the solution, right? So really getting the insights first and looking for those needs that someone else isn't seeing, and then really defining a point of view versus just based on your own judgments and things like that. It's a really subtle, but I love traveling with those folks because they usually see something different. They have the beginner eyes mindset more. Kind of like when we all travel to a new country, we're all, but if you can turn that ability, turn that on and off, that's a really wonderful thing. So I had to unlearn.
Yeah, I think for me, a lot of the projects I'd done before coming to IDEO, I could have been an end user for. So it was like, you know, here's the problem. Okay, open my sketchbook, I'll start sketching. My first project at IDEO was designing the interface for a blood gas analyzer, which regulates blood flow through your body during open heart surgery. I was like, whoa! I kind of like, this is like nothing I've experienced before. So this need to kind of step back and understand kind of the context. So what does it mean to go into the hospital environment and see that? All those sorts of things. I was also like, you know, with some of this interactive media stuff, it was a bad design, well, there's no harm done. But in this case, wow, somebody could die if I did a bad job. So it was a really, that was like it was probably the most extreme entry I could have had into IDEO was giving that as my first project.
My first project was working on a suitcase or something.
Another question? Oh, yeah, right over there.
Of course, we all love you guys, and I think that what you guys do is fantastic. And listening to you, and we started to touch on it earlier, you have this client engagement, which has been a reputation that everybody now respects you, but I'm sure at some point in another way. When I go into a company for the first time or consulting with them, you know, how do you help change that culture? Not just you guys, but how would you advise other people who are not you to be able to do that? Because I think people are afraid to take that investment up front. There's either time constraints or budgetary constraints or all the basic business constraints, and it's hard to convince people to spend the time in color forms without going to the leap of making a design idea. Can you help us with that?
Yeah.
There's something around getting people to play, right? Like,
yes.
So we were, how do you get them to play with you? So small steps, small experiments. And some folks are they're just anxious to play, right? So they want to. Others just won't. They'll try the culture and you know, doesn't make sense for them. We'll try to break them in slowly, but I'd like to say it's 100%, but not always.
Yeah. And I think sometimes it's signaling even from the very first conversation. So we'll do a lot. Sometimes, you know, the client will say, we'd like you to work on this project, could you write a proposal? And it's like they're expecting you to email them a Word document or something. And what we'll often do is say, can we have a conversation about what you're trying to accomplish? And we'll whiteboard out a project plan, because then we can ask questions and say, you know, does this make sense in terms of your time frame? What are your pressures? Like, who are the people who are going to have to make a decision within your organization? So that we create almost an agreement up front before we write a proposal. So we've documented a shared perspective or point of view. And then similarly, I think a lot of times when clients think of a traditional kickoff meeting, it's like, okay, we're going to sit down in a conference room and we're going to be walked through a project schedule in PowerPoint and like talk about all the details and schedules. We try to actually build a generative exercise of brainstorming and prototyping in at the early days. And one of the reasons for that is we're looking for a couple things. One is how much is there alignment among the stakeholders? Are they agreeing or disagreeing so we know how much work we have to do? And the other is just people have great ideas because they've been living in this for a while. We haven't. We want to benefit from their expertise. So it's a big win if we say, hey, there are some deep insights here we can already start to build off of and create some hypotheses. So even, for example, when we're going out in the field and doing some research, we're not just going out completely uninformed. We're actually able to bring some of those things into conversations with people to say, we're thinking that this might be kind of an important part of the solution. We can kind of listen to that and test for that and give them feedback, right? So talk about how much does what they already know help them, and then what are the areas where we need to supplement? So finding out what they don't know.
Yeah, and I'd say we've done it enough. We've done this process enough. If we sense that a client isn't going to be collaborative, we know it won't be successful. So we'll push back on that. So the projects that have been the best have been clients that really play well together.
Yeah, and I think, you know, I think sometimes the projects that are most successful from beginning to end are ones where the client is actually trying to do something different. So this could be like, hire us, go away IDEO in a room and make something and then give it back to us at the end. We prefer ones where they're like, we want to learn how to kind of do this ourselves. So that's why I give some of those healthcare examples are really fun, because we're actually creating the tools for people to do this themselves. We just did a project in New York that was around hospital environment. It was labor and delivery, rethinking what that experience is like. And part of it was identifying some key insights about why patients weren't satisfied. And a big part was, as I had said before, which is, you know, they think they're getting great medical care, but a birth is such a momentous occasion that it's not just about medically caring for the body, it's actually thinking about the whole human being. And there was a mind shift that we could start to build some ideas around, and they've just taken that and run with it. And all these new experiments and prototypes they're doing are things that we're not suggesting, they're just using that toolkit to create.
Have we hypnotized you yet by staring at the screen?
Yeah, sorry.
Alice and I have a AA battery-powered toilet paper dispenser with 2 gigs of RAM. And we were wondering, with your honest feedback, you think there's a market?
Go right to the venture boys, so they'll fund that baby.
That's awesome. How much storage space does it have?
1,000 sheets.
Okay, I think we're just, you gentlemen will be around during lunch and, oh.
I told you.
During lunch.
Just for a little
We gotta
bit
check on
before
that.
I have to check to see what time, because with our flight cancellation
Oh,
yesterday,
right.
I have to see where we're.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay.
But-